Right, very good evening and happy Friday to everybody. We're just going to get started here in a second. I'm just making sure everything's okay. I keep trying to up the quality every time I stream, so I'm just making sure everything is set. I also noticed the music was a bit too loud last time, so that's dialed down. I think we're okay though, so I can pretty much get started. Right, so welcome again. As before, this is literally just a stream going over my latest video upload, going through some questions, topics, answering some comments about it as well, just going over the overall subject. But I have a few more subjects that I want to cover as well, a few other discussions, a couple of theory topics that I've been thinking of, and yeah, anything and everything. And feel free to fire questions at me as well, I'd be happy to answer. So let me just make sure this is okay. Yeah, everything's fine. Stream quality fine. Good, good. NPC12, very good evening to you as well. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, I was surrounded by a crowd there until a minute ago. Okay. Let me just make sure everything else is off here. Last thing I want to do is get disturbed. Music's good. Okay, good, good. Mic, just about good. Alright, so I guess we can get started then. So, the video I uploaded recently is called The Sacred Duty of Sharlayan. So it literally went over the discussion of the Sharlayans' great work, their secret plan, their sacred duty, aka. Going over that 270 years of what exactly it meant to them, what it meant to everybody else, and what the result of it overall was. So there's not really much to say about it other than a lot of people have the opinion that Sharlayan was right in what they did, and a lot of people have the opinion that Sharlayan was wrong about what they did. And there's an argument to be made for both sides, to be honest, because at the one side, Sharlayan did nothing but annoy us before we learned about their sacred duty. Like, we were going to them, why are you being so stubborn? Why are you hiding this information? We're literally fighting for the fate of the planet, and we're gonna lock ourselves on our island. We don't give a damn about anybody else. And then when we finally found out, it gave them some vindication, but not much. In my opinion, they've changed for the better, but at the same time, not much about Sharlayan has changed after Endwalker, because the only thing that's changed is their sacred duty is now done. They no longer have the enchantment over the forum members, so they can actually talk about what they did. But at the same time, they're a public body they answer to the public themselves, because they technically are the public. There are 100 elected members from the public. So it makes you think that not a lot of these people would actually last in their own office. They're probably going to get booted out, essentially, just going, you lied to us. Like, they would have went home that evening after just telling the truth, and just like their families just going, you lied to us. How could you do this to us? You lied to our children. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, I couldn't even say that if I wanted to. It's like, I want to tell you about our great Like, I love that scene. That was probably one of my favorite scenes, when he's like, mind your tongue, Sharlayan. If you'd seen that, and his voice just disappears. That is a hell of an enchantment, I have to say. Like, whoever came up with that is very clever. And the fact that all of them had that done is also very clever. But it also makes you think. Like, one of the things when I was researching the whole topic, one of the things I was thinking about was, okay, they didn't technically lie about anything because they couldn't actually say anything, but they elected to take this decision, to take the enchantment, to say, we're not allowed to do anything, the fate of the planet is at stake. Okay, granted. But in the end, they did lie about it. But it makes you wonder, what else haven't they told us? Is there anything else that we should know that they're not telling us? Is this the only enchantment? Is it possible that this enchantment that they dispelled was only for that subject? Is there other subjects that they can't tell us about? Do they have information about Mericidia? Do they have information about the New World? What is the truth behind Nuncraft's hope and them traveling to Charlian in the first place? There's so many subjects that they're like any governmental body. They don't tell you everything because the citizens don't really need to know everything. Well, debatable subject, but either way. I'm ranting a bit here, so I'll stop that. Let me quickly open the video as well, just to highlight some of the points as well. Where is it? I have so much in my timeline I need to watch as well, not just on FF14. Okay, nope, that's not it. That is it. I'll mute it as well, so I don't need to play it. So yeah, so it literally goes over their entire timeline from the point where they heard the message in the anti-tower all the way to the point of them telling everybody else 270 years later. Which, okay, that's a long time. They did the Rosio thing at the time when everyone knows Rosio. Rosio? What's Rosio? R-O-S-S-I-E. Through European, it was spelled after the French Revolution and the development of modern political. Okay, you're far more knowledgeable about this than I do. I think I'll have to read this later then. Oh, a Gurren Lagann reference. Okay, I was taking that literally. Sorry, I'd never watched Gurren Lagann. It's one of the animes I really wish I watched. I feel like I miss out on a lot because a lot of my friends watch particular animes that I haven't watched. I've watched a lot of anime in my time, but there's certain ones I haven't watched. Gurren Lagann is one of them. Trigon is another one. I really should get caught up. I'll research that reference for you later though. Thank you, Fnatic. I always found this tower though very interesting. I remember the first time I saw it and I was like, okay, that is probably one of the most unique things I've seen in this game to date. It's an upside down castle, essentially. And everything inside it plays out like an upside down castle as well. Like, I remember when you're walking through it, like when I was walking through it taking footage, and you're walking along the ceiling, which is now the floor, and then you look up, there's actually desks on the ceiling with books, and the books are all lying on the desks. So physics works very strange inside that tower. So I have a feeling people walked along the floor and people walked on the top as well. So people were walking along the actual floor and people were walking along the ceiling. Unless that's not how it's supposed to work. Maybe the enchantments faded over the years, I don't know. I'm assuming there was some sort of enchantment that allowed them to do that, but the fact that the tables are still up there and the books are still lying on the tables makes me think that it's actually still active. But it would have been interesting to actually do something like that. Imagine fighting through that dungeon, but everything was backwards like that. It would have been weird. I'd say it probably would have made people nauseous though, to be honest. But yeah, the tower is probably one of the most fascinating things about the entire thing. Like, to make a castle literally upside down in order to get to this point here and then enter it. So essentially, this is a doorway essentially. It goes in and then you enter here. And I think it extends actually beyond what we actually see. Cognitive Summoner, good to see you. But yeah, we only see this part. So we enter the door and then we proceed down a flight of stairs and then we enter another portal. But I think that's the first part of the dungeon, and then the second part of the dungeon is actually inside. So that's where we actually hear from Hydaelyn and everything else. Because you'll notice that it's all indoors. We don't actually see outside of the structure when we're inside. So we're deep under there, I think. But we don't see anything outside, unfortunately. But that allowed them to contact Hydaelyn. But it's not that far down, because the sunlight is there. And the cave system is just above us. And it's down here as well, so you have an underground reservoir. All the water is leading down to this point. This is not very deep. It's not very far down, like... in the scale of things, it's not very far. It's the bottom of a subterranean, that's it. But... I think that's probably the unique thing about the Hinterlands, is that they had a readily accessible location where the plane of the Ethereal Sea and the actual our plane of existence are very close together at this particular point. It's probably because of the elevation or how close to sea level the hinterlands is, possibly. And then you have Heidelin herself going through her entire speech, telling us everything, anything and everything we needed to know. You have the forum opening up their dialogue. Everybody's just like, okay, we're listening carefully. We're scholars just like you. Like, literally everybody here is a scholar. They're all learned individuals. They all know the score. They're just like, all right, you're telling us the truth now. We want to know. And they all get the message. Fortuno, the moon is a gargantuan vessel. I have a question on that in a few minutes though. But yeah, it was an interesting video to make because the entire subject of Sharlayan both intrigued me and annoyed me at the same time when I was playing Endwalker. So exploring it in more detail was something I enjoyed to do. I still remember this, and when I was going back, when I was doing my research, I see this scene totally different now. So when you're looking at this scene, I can remember how angry I was at this scene. When Fortuno finally shows up, and he's like, Sharlayan we have no interest in getting involved in this, essentially. And I'm like, why the hell not? And we're all like, you can't just sit on the sidelines. The final days are coming. He's like, the final days? Nah. If there was going to be a final days, we'd know all about it. And then when you're looking at the scene, knowing everything about Endwalker, it hits totally different. You're just like, now I understand why he was being so coy, so cryptic, and not saying everything, because he literally couldn't. He said the maximum he was able to say. That's why he walked away from the seats here. He's just like, she's like, wait, don't go. Can you just come back and talk to us? And he's like, on this subject, I can't say anything, even if I wanted to. So that's why he continued walking away. And that's why he got so pissed at them as well. He's just like, you're pushing the subject. And I also want to protect you from this. So I'm just going to forbid you from using my name. You'll live though. You'll survive. And then he walks away. But the scene hits totally different now. If you haven't watched the entire scene, I recommend going back and watching it again. Because it hits very differently. Sharlayan will under no circumstances intervene in the conflicts between Eorzea and the Gallian Empire. Good old Graha getting to the answers. But yeah, there's not really much else to say about the video. I thought I had a lot more to say, but the subject was very straightforward. It was literally just how this duty came to pass. And then how it ended up, essentially. But it did answer the question of essentially why Sharlayan was the way it was. And at the same time, there is an argument to whether or not Sharlayan is still the same old Sharlayan or now renewed because they don't have this duty holding them back or weighing on their shoulders, as it were. I still dislike this scene because Fortuno's main strategy to get Alfie and Ali onto a ship was Japan shame culture. I've never heard that term before, Japan shame culture. Although, now that you're mentioning it, I think I've seen it in movies before. I think he did want them to just like, come with me, you'll be safe. But at the same time, I agree with you because he had to do it in a way of saying, I can't tell you why I want you to abandon this fruitless endeavor. I already know there's a plan in motion, I just can't tell you. So just trust me. If he's turned around and just said, I want you to trust me as your father. Come with me. And the answers will follow. That's all you probably need to say. They wouldn't have done it, but he could have tried that. Although he did try other methods to get them to essentially just quit what they were doing. But the fact that they were trying to drag Sharlayan into the war was something he wasn't going to stand for either. So that's why his anger levels went up. I feel like his plan was to make them want to be obedient, to be brought back into the family. And then he was keeping them at arm's length for the rest of Endwalker because he was just protecting them. Like, when you see him break down then after everybody shows up to help Sharlayan, he realizes he was wrong. If he had involved everybody, they would have been ready to go ages ago. I mean, yeah, sure, Hydaelyn told Sharlayan the entire plan. Just saying that there's a final day is coming. If Sharlayan had written an entire report on that and then went to the world and just said, we received a message from Hydaelyn, the final day is going to come one day, a lot of people would have probably believed them. It's not like there's some crackpot with a sign just going, the end is nigh. This is Sharlayan, for crying out loud. Everybody liked Sharlayan, and everybody listened to them. To be honest, it feels more like he knew his incredibly curious kids would investigate his very suspicious behavior and was trying to bait them back to Sharlayan and then lock them up. Exactly. And then lock them up. It would have done the duty of protecting Sharlayan's secret and also protecting his children by taking them back there and locking them away in Labyrinthos with everything else. That's a good plan. That sounds like a crappy father to me, and that's technically what Fortuno was until this point. I don't care what your kids do. You don't just go to them just going, you can't use my name anymore. I don't care if you're trying to protect them or not. That's too far. Like, I remember how, I was like, I'm gonna kill you, Fortuno, for doing that to Alphino and Alisaie. Good times. That scene doesn't feel like a long ago, but it was so long ago back then. They go through the entire video. I go through explaining everything, the Ragnarok. I still don't, well, I do understand. I've watched Doctor Who. I know how it works, kind of. Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. But the fact that this ship exists in two places at the same time, because of Dynamis. Because of Dynamis. It exists in both places because of Dynamis. Is, okay, it's as good as an excuse as any. It's a funny excuse. Like, they could have made any excuse, but they decided to make a Doctor Who reference with the wibbly wobbly timey wimey. So, I approve of that. Levier plus Scion family dinner scene. I want that. Imagine that at the end of Endwalker, we get a dinner scene at the Levier estate, a big giant dining table with everybody there, like all the main figures of Endwalker around this giant table. So you have 4 members, you have all of us Scions, maybe the leadership of the Urizen Alliance. I'd love that. If we got a dinner scene like that, I would be very happy. And I'd be like, bring on 7.0 now. I am content. Coach and Summoner, I hope we get that. To be honest, I really hope we do. I mean, if Dynamis can erase souls and turn people into monsters stronger than ancients, I'll believe it. It seems to be capable of anything right now. It is both interesting to people, but at the same time, people are annoyed by it. Because Dynamis seems to be this catch-all of... Excuse me? It seems to be this catch-all of, like, anything peculiar, we just explain it away as Dynamis, because Dynamis is apparently this thing now. We only realize it exists now, but it seems to be capable of almost anything. And we have seen its capabilities in Ultima Thule, for example. It literally, well, as far as we're aware, it created that planet of Elysian. Or if somebody else had a hand behind it. I have a feeling there's a hand behind it. My excuse for that would be, it's dependent on the emotions of individuals in order to shape Dynamis, essentially. I don't know what sort of emotional shape of Dynamis shaped this, but okay. Could have been us. But yeah, Dynamis is a very... It's still today a controversial topic, because it seems to be just like the MacGuffin they pull out of the pocket just to go, this is your excuse. I'm just like, yeah, sure, but you can't just pull Dynamis out as the MacGuffin excuse every time you want to use it. It can only bring you so far. It's a fundamental force of the universe in FF14, along with Aether, but you can't keep using it all the time. It's gonna get stale if you keep using it. Then you have everybody flying around, coming back home. The Sharlayan's duty is finally over, done with, and a new Sharlayan is born. Not really, but I'm waiting for this new Sharlayan to come forth. Like, they said they had plans for the moon. That hasn't come to fruition yet. We know the Loporrits are busy right now. I'm loving that storyline, by the way. Like, the same way I loved the Omicron storyline. The tribal quest for the Loporrits I also really enjoyed. They gave us a story that is fully believable, and I'm embracing that. But I'm still waiting for the Rollcrest story to pan its way out. So I have a feeling there's going to be another one. Another Rollcrest story to cap this all off. And I think everything that's happened until this point is going to lead into it. But I'm hoping for a bigger presence on the moon. So new developments and stuff like that. Now that we have a connection to the moon. But it's not for certain how long that connection is going to last. I'm still not really sure why that connection is actually still active. I mean, the tower is not really active anymore. It requires Aether to fuel this portal, but it seems to be there just for gameplay purposes right now. But in lore, they're still using it actively. Although they do have a lot of guards around the tower now, just to say, like, no, not all of you can use the portal. Like, the moon doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the Loporrits. Thank you very much. Goodbye. But yeah, there's not really much to say about the video anymore. Nice glamour. It's probably one of my favorite places in Sharlayan is the Numenon. I still need to do this quest. I'm only doing quests very slowly because I am documenting every quest that I do. I'm also recording every quest I do as well, because quests, especially ones like that, have cutscenes that you can't access again. So I'm usually very methodical about recording quest lines now. I've only started doing that in the last few months, but it allows me to get all the details. So for example, I've recorded everything about the Loporrit quests, and I've noticed that the Unending Journey only has some of the cutscenes. So I'm able to get the rest of them thanks to recording them, which is still a shame to me. I still don't like the fact that the Unending Journey is only half a book. I mean, how hard is it to access the other cutscenes? They are cutscenes in the end. Ystola's here. She's still on her way to... I will find a way. To secure it means to traverse the rift to other worlds and put an end to Golbez's schemes. I'm sure you will, Ystola. I'll be talking about her and Golbez in a few minutes as well. That's one of the topics I wanted to go into. But I just want to cap off the sacred duty of Sharlayan first. But essentially, yeah, there's not really much else I need to say about the Sharlayan video. I hope that Sharlayan continues to be a main... I hope they actually take a bigger stance and start to branch out, because they have started to embrace the other peoples of Aetheris at this point. They've started inviting refugees over to Sharlayan. So they've opened their borders essentially, which is brilliant. So I'm hoping that continues, and I hope they keep doing that. And I hope they get involved with everything that's going to happen going forward. So as we continue to explore the rest of Aetheris, I hope they give us information regarding that, because if anybody has information about the current state of Mericidia or the current political situation in the New World, it's Sharlayan. This lot tends to have information on everything. So I have a feeling Sharlayan will probably be our first stop in 7.0. Just going, we have developments in this part of the world, we're going over there. And Sharlayan is our starting point. But yeah, essentially, that is the sacred duty of Sharlayan. Not really much to go into, because the subject is very straightforward. Sharlayan is not straightforward, but it is what it is. I do want to answer the comments that have been put in the video thus far. So, I had the video open there, didn't I? I did, yes. So I will answer some of the comments, because I've intentionally left them so I can answer them now. So, they became warriors of light in a different way. They carried this mission on in secret to save as many people, Flana, and artifacts, etc., and set up on the moon. Hydaelyn seems to have had a role to play in the planning. She made 2 plans, one encouraging a direct attack and an escape plan. This was a good tactic on her part. In the end, it took both halves of this plan to get the final battle site. That is very true. So, I said that in the video as well. The fact that Hydaelyn set up this entire plan with Sharlayan resulted in the construction of the Ragnarok. Like, without that ship, even if Hydaelyn gave us the location, we didn't have the ability to get there. Because we needed to transport ourselves and the other Scions to the end of the universe, literally. Now, we know Xenos did it. Xenos did fly to the end of the universe because he gorged himself on the rest of the Mother Crystal. It is conceivable that if we didn't have the Ragnarok, we could have summoned a different primal and ridden that to the end of the universe, but as far as I'm aware, there is a vacuum in the space of FF14. I don't think you can just fly through it like that. There's no air, for example, as far as we're aware. Like, they haven't really gone into detail about what space is in FF14. But yeah, they make a very good point that they were on a different path than ours. Like, in the end, they were working towards the salvation of Aetheris, the same way we were working for the salvation of Aetheris. So it was Hydaelyn playing the long game, essentially. She informed them because, do you know what, they're contacting me. I'm going to just give them a bit of information. They're pretty smart. It looks like they can do a bit. And in the end result of their plans did help us with the Ragnarok. And as I explained as well, their hoarding of knowledge preserved much of it for future generations, because a lot of that information, for example, could have been destroyed in the Calamity. It could have been lost in wars and conflicts. Like, there's multiple wars and conflicts that happens. The fall of Alamigo is a prime example. Garlemald burning a wrath of terror across continents, another. They didn't tend to destroy knowledge, they did tend to collect it, but it prevented a lot of that knowledge falling into Garlean hands as well, which is good. So that's a very good one. The whole reveal about them in Endwalker felt really strange, rather. Even though their contact with Hydaelyn was already established, how it came about still felt off. Like, there were some story seams left over from the decision to make Endwalker a single expansion instead of 2. Already comparing the mood between Death Unto Dawn and Endwalker speaks for itself. I don't recall them ever planning to make Endwalker. Wait, hang on a second. Let me read that again. Like, there were some story seams left over from the decision to make Endwalker a single expansion instead of 2. Did they ever mention that? I don't recall them ever saying, we're going to split the expansion into 2, or we're going to address some of these storylines in one expansion and then the rest of them in 7.0. I mean, granted, Endwalker did feel a bit jarring to some people, myself included, because its entire storyline was wrapped up in 6.0. And then the rest of the patches, which usually flesh out the rest of an expansion story, were very different. They were setting up a brand new one for us in Endwalker. So, some parts of it were really strange. Them diving into the Ethereal Sea is pretty likely in my opinion, because Hydaelyn had to expend more energy to communicate. She couldn't do that anymore. But the fact that we got so close to her, and they got so close to her as well, allowed her to communicate a lot easier. And also, this was before the 7th Umbral Calamity as well, so Hydaelyn was likely a lot stronger back then, because there was only 6 rejoinings at that time, instead of 7. Already comparing the mood between Death Unto Dawn and Endwalker speaks for itself. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that. The mood between Death Unto Dawn and Endwalker. I mean, Death Unto Dawn ended on a cliffhanger with us going, alright, we prevented the calamity from happening because they literally blew up Cartano, which would have blown up the continent. But I'll have to think about that. I'll have to get back to you on that now, to be honest. No amount of context justifies their actions, regardless of whatever consequences stem from being completely transparent. If you mean the lack of actions or initiative, it might seem strange at first. However, Charlene is applied to hold some very dark and destructive spells that they do not think should be released even during Endwalker, as it would only hasten their doom. That's a very good point. That is part of the knowledge that Charlene does hold. Like, for example, when I did my video about Nuncraft's Hope, the ship that saved a bunch of people during the Calamity, Nuncraft apparently channeled and used a powerful spell that transported that ship and everybody on it out of the ocean beyond Alabasta's Spine in northern Eorzea into the mountains of Garabania. That's a hell of a spell. Like, to be able to transport a ship and all of its inhabitants halfway across a continent, essentially. That is a hell of a feat. Like, whatever spell used, I'm still curious about what that spell was. And I actually made a video disputing whether or not Nuncraft was actually an Ascian, because that spell would have required some hell of knowledge to pull off, and a lot of power as well. More than one person would possess. I mean, throwing herself into the rift along with Thancred nearly ended Y'shtola. I'm assuming that spell would have worked on the same principle. And then you have the spell that teleported the Isle of Val as well. I'm thinking that's the same spell, because the Isle of Val disappeared and then ended up somewhere else. But we do know that the Charlians locked a lot of stuff away, a lot of powerful weapons, and Eureka is a prime example of them locking stuff away that even the Ascians wanted to get their hands on. It's kind of like a giant. It's kind of like a gentle giant with a nuclear arsenal. Paranoia and effective silencing restraints on esoteric information. Okay, that's a handful. Let me read that again. It's kind of like a gentle giant with a nuke arsenal, paranoia, and effective silencing restraints on esoteric information. I'm having a hard time processing that, to be perfectly honest. That's going way over my head. But it's just... It's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like a toddler with a nuclear button, is what I think you're trying to say. Just doing what Hydaelyn instructed was the safe option. Though it would have been nice for them to actually cooperate with the Scions sooner, alas the plot needed to be stretched. That's a good point as well. The fact that news of the final days was already coming, people were starting to know even the term final days. That should have set off alarm bells in Charlene to say, okay, people are starting to cop on. The final days is actually coming. And we know there's one person among the Scions who Hydaelyn has been actively communicating with, aka us. That should have been enough of a signal for Fushino to go back to Charlene. Alright, they know about the final days, we need to make a decision. And I'm assuming that's what they did. They made a decision and just go, we're not telling anybody. Hydaelyn gave us this duty. Who cares about anybody else? And they decided not to lift the enchantment, and everything just went on as it did in Endwalker. It would have been a lot better had they just come out sooner and told us. It would have made things a lot easier, but as they say, the plot needed to be stretched out, so that was the story that was being told. Bad Charlene, essentially. So both of those comments are good. I like those. Thank you for the video. You're very welcome. You are very welcome. I'll answer the comments later because you don't want to see me droning through answering of the comments. More like the Scar duty. Okay. I don't know what that means. Wait, I didn't spell it wrong, did I? No. Sacred. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. That's all the comments there is to it. So I probably should have done this video later when more people saw it, but it is what it is. Where am I? Okay. So essentially, that's the subject of the sacred duty of Charlene. So I suppose I can move on to the other subjects that I actually had planned. I had a couple of discussions and a couple of theory discussions as well. So couple of which I only thought of today. Yeah, the one thing that was mentioned to me last week, or in another video rather, is the final cutscene that we saw with Golbez on the moon of the 13th. And there was something apparently I missed. So I want to actually look at that cutscene again. Because when they did the zoom out and the fade away of the fog to find out that his base of operations is on the moon, and that's where he's keeping Ashdaya as well, in the crater where Zodiac's piece should have been kept. But there's no Zodiac piece there anymore as far as we're aware, unless Golbez has done something with it, which is highly likely. But people were stating, because there was no swords around the seal, that he actually did repurpose the swords, which I didn't notice. So I think it's probably one of the last cutscenes, was it? Or maybe I've gone too far. Wait, that's right, isn't it? Yeah. Redman. It's on fire. Meanwhile, on the moon of the 13th. Right, so somebody was saying that he had the sides of his domain decorated with the sword brands that Hydaelyn used to seal Zodiac away. This was something I didn't notice. So we have Ashdaya. Poor girl, she's suffering like hell. We're gonna get you soon, don't worry. If she dies, I'm gonna freak. Right.
Kanyatso and Rubicante have joined with the great flow.
Alright, I don't want it to advance because I want to see some of these cutscenes. I didn't see a sword yet. No. Unique architecture, but nothing we haven't seen before.
In this world, 'tis the ravenous who are useful, and
They're not them.
few were as ravenous as they.
No, no swords yet. No?
You were fine pawns, my archfiends, and you have played your parts to perfection.
Yeah. If only they were actually alive, I used to tell them that. But you call them pawns, that's all they were. You're on your own now, dude.
But with the goal in sight, I need no minions to do my bidding.
This is still why I think that this is going to be the final thing with Golbez, because if he doesn't need anybody anymore, he must be really ready to do what he needs to do.
Hereon, I shall walk alone.
But you can notice here that this area of operations that he's standing in is not a big arena. So I don't think we're going to be fighting in there. We'll probably be fighting on the surface of the moon. Aw, poor Ashdaya. Sorry, girl. We'll get you out. Is that the... Oh, that is them! That's the swords! They're broken. But he had to... How am I didn't notice that until now? So that is the swords. How did I not notice that? I must be stupid. Wow. So there they are, look. Sword. 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 Broken swords, yeah, but...
At long
and they're
last,
kind of like a
the
weird
end
color.
draws nigh.
How did I miss that? Interesting.
The end to life on that star. And the end to my suffering.
To the end of life on that star and the end to my suffering. So essentially what he's saying is he's going to be starting the clock again, allowing them to die, because right now, as you know, when a Void's End dies, their aether dissipates and then it coalesces again back into the form that they were in originally. It does look really cool from the moon, doesn't it? It's just like, it's like a swirling dark pebble. Hello, Mr. Sir. But yeah, the fact that those swords are actually there, somehow I missed them. Thank you for so much, whoever pointed that out to me originally. But yeah, those swords are there. Okay, so there was a piece of Zodiac at one point. Not anymore. So that fuels a couple of theories. I won't go into them right now because I have other videos to do, and I'm going to do catch-up videos for 6.4 as well. The theory about Golbez is probably one of the most, well, it's one of the most interesting subjects about the entire story. That who is he essentially? Because he's not a typical Voidsent. Some people have a theory that he's Zodiac, or that piece of Zodiac has manifested its own personality and is walking around like that. Because we haven't really seen what Zodiac is, because the only thing we've seen is Fandaniel inhabiting Zodiac. We never saw Zodiac wake up and just go, I am Zodiac, I will end everything, I will bring peace to this star. We never saw any of that. So we don't know what Zodiac was like. We don't know what his personality was like. That shot at the 13th at the end really tied the theme of 6.0 with the new saga together very well. It's very Ultimate Tool-ish. That's a good point, yeah, it is. Like, it's literally end of the world. Like, a world couldn't fall any further than the 13th has fallen to darkness. Like, he really wants to give up, similarly to the Descendants of Ultimate Duel, but still is striving for that giving up like Meteion did. He essentially wants to break the wheel. So he wants the life-death cycle to stop. He just wants people to be able to die and pass on, essentially. Instead of dying, drifting around, and then your soul and Aether come back together, and you're like, oh my god, would you just let me die? Like, imagine that. Imagine how tormenting that would probably be if you're having to live in a world like that, and you can't even die. You keep dying and coming back the way you were, only suffering a bit more. It's just like, it sounds like hell. I'd say that's probably what hell is. It's a circle of hell for sure. But yeah, that's interesting. I'll factor that into my future video as well. The fact that those swords actually are there. So whoever actually pointed it out to me, thank you very much. I completely missed that. It was very subtle in the background, but I really should have caught it. But thank you. What else did I want to go through? So that's Golbez's cutscene. Okay. It does sound terrible. Okay, what else was there I wanted to go through? If you have any questions, feel free to throw questions at me, because I'll answer any topics that you want to discuss. Otherwise, I'm just going to go through my own. I've mainly just been getting topics based on what gameplay I've been doing for the past few weeks. So, for example, Eureka Orthos has been giving me a lot of... It's been giving me a lot to contemplate as well in terms of its story. It doesn't have much of a story, but there's enough lore elements there for me to piece together a story. And it's going to tie into future videos as well. But there is something about that I want to discuss. But I'll discuss Eureka Orthos at the end of the video because it is spoiler related. So I'll let people tune out if they don't want to see it. I could see some nutjobs enjoying the world of darkness, at least during the initial centuries of the Flood. Think Xeno style people doing manhunts. I think that's what it would have been like. Because if you remember the cutscene of Zero when she was still mortal, and then those people, the what the hell do you call them? Memoriates. They were going around constantly just like slaughtering people in order to gain more power. So I would imagine they would have been doing that. What do you think of Azam's concepts were? I personally believe she could have made Amaro. That's a good question, isn't it? What would the original Azam have created? like, given the fact of what he was a wanderer, an adventurer. He always went around helping people. He was essentially the warrior of light of his time. So you could think of him very similar to what we are. We travel the world helping people. Honestly, an Amaro or a Chocobo sounds like a concept that Azem would have created. Like, Chocobos have become our stalwart companions, and it's not only with us, it's through all the Final Fantasy games as well. A Chocobo sounds like... It sounds like an Azem creation. But if you did notice as well, there was no Chocobos in Elpis. Like, I think one of the things I really expected to see in Elpis was a Chocobo. We never saw one though, unfortunately. Azem probably had some very inspired concepts, considering all the cultures they have seen. That's true as well. Like, they could have invented a number of different things. New weapon styles, new arts. Like, we know a lot of the arts that did exist, well, that exist today did exist back in Elpis, because we saw them utilizing it. But he could have created job arts himself as well. Alternatively, their travel stories and souvenirs would inspire more gifted creators. I'm assuming Vana would have inspired him as well. Like, she was an inspiration to a lot of people back in the day. So I'd say she would have inspired Azem as well. Maybe by that time they had become patented concepts, since Elpis was a testing site. That's a good point as well. They could have been tested, verified, and then released out for everybody to use. So they wouldn't need to be on Elpis anymore, except to act as examples of current creatures on Aetheris that needed to interact with the test specimens. Other than test specimens interacting with test specimens, because you can't just have test specimens interacting with test specimens. You don't get a good result. You need to have them interacting with other creatures that are wandering around Aetheris, for example. For my part, Azem's conversations includes Vana and anyone holding that seat. And we don't even know if it's the both of them either. Like, there was probably a number of people occupying that seat before Vana got to it, and then she passed it on to Azem. And we know Vana was old enough. They, as far as we're aware, they don't really age that much. But yeah, the ancients and the people who occupy the convocation seats are a strange bunch. Like, I have a number of theories about them, particularly about La Habrea, but I'll probably get into that in my next video. That was actually leading me to another theory I just had today. I was actually knocking around Elpis just recently, and it gave me an idea. So, for example, how well do you feel about the current story direction, specifically 6.1 and onwards? How do I feel about it? Well, the story was a bit jarring at the beginning, because I was used to the formula of you do an expansion and then you spend 3 patches filling out the rest of the storyline, tying any loose ends, and then you set up for the next expansion. That's the formula, or that was the formula until Endwalker launched, because Endwalker's entire story tied up the rest of the story of the entire game, and then we spent 6.1 onwards setting up some new tale, essentially. Newfound adventure, essentially. I have already given my opinion on Newfound Adventure, but my general opinion is, just to reiterate it, is Newfound Adventure, for me, lacked the adventure. Like, I remember when they announced Newfound Adventure, people are like, oh my god, we're freed from all this end of the world stuff. We're not going to be jumping around fighting fires. We're going out on an adventure for the sake of the adventure. Everybody was so excited. That lasted all of like 5 minutes. We went out on a new adventure. Tataru told us to go to Razatan. We ended up getting tied into a new journey to the bottom of the ocean with Estinian, and that set up the entire Void storyline. So we literally went back to defending the fate of the world. A world. Not Etheir's world, but that's about to be what's going to happen, I think. But we instantly jumped back into where we were. I wanted to just go on an adventure. I wanted to spend those patches running around on an adventure. Just a new adventure for the sake of adventure. I wanted to feel like I was level 15 again. Running around in even a new area or a familiar area doing quests. That's what I wanted, but it didn't turn out like that. So, in my opinion, 6.1 and Newfound Adventure lacked the adventure part. We got a new adventure, granted, but it wasn't the one that people expected, nor the one we desired. People were fatigued, in my opinion. I was fatigued. Like, we literally just saved the universe. And then we're jumping right back into it, saving another planet. I just wanted a break. I know it's hard to judge since Heidi and Zeke saga supposedly ended, and we're at the cusp of something new. But that's a bit of false advertising with Panda, Omphalos, and the 13s still deal with themes of the HC saga. In his defense, but it did not start that way. We for once looked for trouble and found it, instead of the other way around. That's a good point as well. We went around poking our nose in, and we found trouble. Like, nobody said we had to poke our nose into the void, but we did. Although, we did kind of owe him one, so we had to do it. But yeah, on to another subject. Something I actually just thought about today. I remember thinking about this during Shadowbringers. And the main reason I'm thinking about it is I'll bring it up right now. So let me bring up the world map real quick. So this is the world map of the first as we know it today. So you can see the flood all around, coalesced into this one position. Only these land masses were spared. Now, if you think these land masses look familiar, you're 100% correct, because these land masses are pretty much identical to the land masses you'd see of Eorzea. So, for example, if let me look up a map of Eorzea, or actually I have a map here, give me a second. Images, video images. It's a good thing I never throw anything away anymore, so I always keep things on hand. Let me bring up a map of Eorzea. So I remember seeing this within days of Shadowbringers launching. I'm just going like, that's very interesting. Wait, where's my map of Eorzea? There we go. So here's a map of Eorzea. Oh, yeah. Okay. Don't be janky, Windows 11. Thank you very much. So here's a map of Eorzea, and here's a map of the first. Oh, God. And let me bring the stream back up. So, as you can see, the land masses look very similar, don't they? Even the formations, islands, inlets, rivers, mountains, even Wildbrand is all the same. So, this pretty much confirmed with us early on in Shadowbringers that the land masses of the reflections mirror the land masses of the source, which is our world. My mouth gets too dry if I keep talking. But yeah, you can see like the land masses are the same. So you have Ul'dah, and then you have Amarang down here, desert area. The occupying around this area, which is Mordona, is where the Crystal Tower is right now. Interesting coincidence, I think not. Then you have Wildbrand over here, where Limsa was. And then you have the Northern Territories over here, which is the Fairy Kingdom in the first, but is Ishgard in our world today. We're missing something over here. We have no Alamigo, but who's to say there's not something over there? Or maybe there was some just a little further north and it's gone now. But my main point that I'm trying to make is, like, this is common knowledge. We all knew this. So I found this out a couple of days after Shadowbringers again. I was just looking at the map just going, why does it look like Eorzea? Because it is Eorzea. So this confirmed in my mind that the reflections land masses are all a reflection of the source. So everything wiped out by the flood is essentially the Highland map. So all the land masses around us are gone. Sharlayan would have been up here, it's gone. Everything else is gone. The islands down below us are gone. Davnir, gone. They're all down, so they're all gone. But what I was thinking about today is, okay, they mirror the reflection, or they mirror the source because they are its reflection. But is the source our land masses? So if I bring up the full world map of the source right now, if I could frickin' find it. We do have a map, don't we? Wait, it's not gonna... Ah, there we go. What I was thinking to myself today was, are the land masses of the source, Eorzea, everything else, are these how the land masses looked to the ancients when Aetheris was still one? Like, granted, the planet was probably much bigger back then, but it makes me think that the land masses were still the same, or not much different at all, or maybe the planet was pretty much the same size. We can't fully be certain. I'd say it probably was a bit bigger. But it made me think that the land masses all those years ago, when the ancients were still walking around Amarot, everything else, their land masses were the same land masses that we see on the source today. And that had me thinking, okay, let's consider that for a moment. If the land masses were the same, where was everything located on those particular land masses? Like, if we compare our map, where were the main sources or the main sites of the ancient society? So if I look back again at the world map of the first, I really could have just tabbed. We're looking for example, we're looking for Amarot. Now, we know where Amarot, well, we know where the fake one is. Now, we do know that there's ruins underneath the sea, but I think that Emmett Selk built that facsimile of Amarot above the ruins of what was Amarot. So, I have a feeling that that's where Amarot is. Amarot was or is on this island, or near this island, or a sunken portion of this island. So this is where Amarot is on the first. But if you look at the source, that would mean that Amarot was around here. Now, it begs the question, alright, so we know where Amarot is, but we know Amarot, or the ruins of Amarot, and most of the ancient civilization's ruins for that matter, only exist on the first. We've never seen them on the source. We see plenty of ruins from civilizations past, the Allegans, prime example, but we have never seen ruins of the ancient societies on the source. We've only seen them on the first, and they're readily available on the first. The Churning Mist and Azizla with Elpis. Azizla has its own unique story, actually. I'll get into that in a couple of minutes. I actually know exactly where Azizla came from. And it might actually be a contender for the site. The only thing we know about Elpis in the modern day is what Elidibus told us. So he's like, you want to know about Elpis? Okay, what do you want to know? Neria ruin remains. Now, we know ancient ruins were very resilient. Like, the ruins that we saw, well, it's probably easier just to show, isn't it? So let's go down to the Tempest. Imagine Amarot, a city of vast knowledge and order under Limsa, the most degenerate place. It's not the most degenerate place. Limsa, yeah, it has its rough sides, but it's like Dublin in a lot of ways. It has its order. It has its order. It may not be everybody else's cup of tea, but it's order nonetheless. Now, we notice that there is ruins underneath the Tempest. These things have been lying here for potentially thousands of years. I remember the cutscene where Y'shtola was looking at it. She couldn't get a knife through it. She couldn't even put a pin or a piece of paper through the cracks. That's how good they were. But these ruins are extremely resilient. You'd need a fair amount of force in order to destroy them. So, if ruins like this did exist on the source, it would have made sense that we would have seen them. But it begs the question. Back to the question of Elpis. Okay, so let's consider for a moment that their world map was the same as our world map. Where would Elpis be on this map? It's entirely possible that we could encounter Elpis on this world map at some point, like the old Elpis, like the nary a ruin remains Elpis. I mean, granted, yeah, it was floating islands in the sky. I doubt they would have flown there for very long. I'd say they would have fell down at some point. But it makes you wonder, what landmass were they flying above? The fantasy version of Roman concrete. That's a good way of putting it. But yeah, it mainly just got me to the theory of their land masses are the same as ours. An interesting thing to think about, because it makes you think, are we going to encounter actual ruins of the ancient civilization on the source? Granted, I've already said we haven't seen any yet. They're readily available on the first. We've already noticed that. And we've already seen working facilities on the first, which have been preserved for tens of thousands of years. And they survived the sundering as well. Granted, they were underwater, but it is what it is. But who's to say they're not underwater on the source as well? Like, think about that for a moment. These ruins, those ruins, and the academia that we went to explore were all entirely underwater. If you look at Aetheris, we haven't really done much underwater exploration. So it's entirely conceivable that pieces of Amarot, or even a large portion of it, are actually under the source. We are the source after all. So ruins of Amarot might be under here, but ruins of other things might be actually swallowed by the sea, like Atlantis in a lot of ways. Like Atlantis was swallowed by the sea, and then there's no trace of it. Is it entirely possible that these ruins are lying around here somewhere? Like, is there a part of the world where these ruins have endured? Or are they underwater like we saw on the first? It just had me thinking. And I'd like to think that we're able to find them one day. But I'd like to find what remains of Elpis. I mean, I know Elizabeth said nary a ruin remains, but that means that they know where it is. It means they've been there. I mean, granted, they were, for lack of a better word, dicking around for thousands of years. I'd say they would have actually explored Elpis at one point. But I'd like to know. I'd like to be able to see where it was. Like, these islands up here, like, we never really got an explanation for these. These floating islands up here, look. We never really got an explanation about what these are. So, that could be something. Rue, you were saying regarding Aziz La. Aziz La is an interesting topic. I'll quickly go into it here. I have another video planned for that though. But Aziz La is located at the moment right around here. I think it's right around here. Yeah. So Aziz La is roughly around here. But Aziz La didn't originate here. Aziz La actually originated on the other side of the world, right here, where the burn is right now. So what the Allegans did essentially is they constructed massive machines that elevated giant portions of this land into the sky, and then they moved them over here. But Aziz La was entirely mobile. They designed it to be floating islands, but they moved them around as they needed them. They just happened to be here when Alag fell, essentially, and the calamity came, and that's where they stayed. They didn't move around anymore. Maybe those ruins are why Ilsabard is not unclouded. Yeah, this is annoying me as well. I'm really sick of this. We're a couple of expansions in now at the moment, and we still haven't got a world map. I want a world map. I'm hoping with the third Eorzean encyclopedia that we're about to get, that we get a world map. An actual world map. But if Pandemonium is below Elpis in the truest geographical sense, then Elpis should be around Old Sharlayan the Empty, because that is where Pandemonium respawned. That's a good question as well. We don't exactly know much about Pandemonium, other than the fact that its doorway is located on Elpis. So the theory is it's a floating island or islands below Elpis, like hovering in a low orbit below Elpis. We still don't know exactly why it respawned in the Ethereal Sea, or if it's even the real Pandemonium. We can't be certain. It's entirely possible it was. That's how Pandemonium was floating, just as a floating castle. That's how it had always been, because we never really saw beyond it. So it's entirely possible that it is actually the real Pandemonium, just teleported. But we're not going to wait long to find out. Well, blah blah. We're not going to have to wait long to find out about that. But that's a story for another day. But yeah, I just thought this was an interesting topic. That it makes me hopeful for the rest that there's other things that we need to see. Like, there's so much on this map that we've yet to see. Like, there's so much to explore. The Northern Wastes, everything. There's so much on this map that is untouched by us. Like, there's so much mystery, so much to discover. Hingashi, another one. How do you feel about my theory that Emmett Selk created Hachi, given he made multiple empires that resulted in calamities, much like... I keep saying Hachi, damn it. Okay. Created Maki, given he made multiple empires that result in calamities, much like Maki did. It's entirely possible that it was a creation of his or another Asian, because he did have a hand in creating the Allagan Empire. He created the Garlean Empire. Who's to say he didn't create Maki? Like, the fact that Maki went above and beyond on their conquest in the War of the Magi against their enemies, using very potent civilization-ending weapons against their enemies, like the plague that they set upon Nim, for example. That was a stroke of genius. Like, that literally crippled Nim. Despite the fact they had advanced healing magics, they couldn't do a thing about it. And it literally ended their civilization and ended their participation in the war, essentially. Very similar fate happened to the Isle of Val. It also dipped in the live stream. That's a good point as well. Like, as far as we're aware with teleportation in FF14, it works the same as ethereal travel. So, you teleport, you disappear, you access the live stream, you flow along it, and then you exit at a different portion, which is on the other side of the planet. That's how ethereal travel works in FF14. So who's to say that the spell that teleported the Isle of Val, that teleported Nooncrest Hope, that also ended up with Pandemonium ending where it was, didn't actually happen because of that. Like, they could have... Pandemonium could have been thrown into the live stream and actually waited there for thousands of years, just floating. And then it ended up pushed out of the live stream well after the final days was over. And there it is. But it's technically not out of the Ethereal Sea yet. It's still in the Ethereal Sea. That's the strange part. So it didn't appear above ground. It's still in the Ethereal Sea where not many people can access it. Because access to the Ethereal Sea is not an easy thing to do, short of your quick trip through with the ethereal travel. It's nighttime, isn't it? Yes. So there was something I wanted to check as well. Tinfoil theory. Yeah, there's a lot of tinfoil theory going around. It's like, you have to take everything with a grain of salt in this game because it can always go very differently. I love making theory videos, but at the same time, I have to be very careful about my theory videos. Like, Elpis is one of my favorite locations. Like, it's got so much going on. There's so many experiments going on. One of my favorites is down there with the Ori. But I really hope we come back to this. I hope we explore this further. Because just having this one window into the past is brilliant. But I really hope we get more. Okay, what else did I want to discuss here? There's not really much else I needed to discuss or wanted to discuss really, because I discussed the video and a couple of topics I had, but I suppose I can go on to some of the, well, the more dramatic things from the last couple of weeks. Like, for example, I wanted to talk about FanFest as well, because as you've probably seen from, well, it's been happening in every FF14 community essentially, that have you made the Discord server for your channel yet? I really enjoy the servers other lore mongers have made. I've been thinking about it, but I don't think I'm there yet. I think eventually I probably will, but for now I'm happy with just the medium of YouTube channels, but also being able to communicate via streams is actually giving me that outlet, and it's giving you guys a direct communication with me as well, just so we can bounce ideas off me, bounce theories off me, and we can just have a back and forth. The same way you'd have with a Discord. I might visit in the future, but for now I have no plans for a Discord. It might change though. Depends what happens. But yeah, about FanFest. As you've probably seen for the last few weeks, FanFest has been a cause of a great amount of drama in the FF14 community. So the main focus of the drama has been, well, I was going to say the supposed, but the actual lack of proper communication from Square Enix on the subject itself, because they promised us a new system. I appreciate that, really, thank you. The new system for what they've been doing for FanFest tickets, it was the right idea, but it was the worst execution they could have done. So essentially what I mean by that is, like, I said it in my last stream, like when the last NA FanFest happened, and I'm talking about the last live one, not the streamed one. When that one happened, the tickets were first come, first served. I can still remember the drama that happened after that. Like, people were fighting to get in the queues. People were getting booted out of the queues. The site was crashing multiple times. By the time it was done, nobody could even get their tickets because the site kept crashing due to all the interest. So that was an oversight on SE's part, underestimating how much people wanted to go to FanFest. Now, after that FanFest, now this only happened to NA as well. Like, NA sold out in minutes with the last FanFest, and the site crashed multiple times. With EU, we didn't sell out right away, and the site never crashed. We all got our tickets. It even went to general sales, and yeah, it was pretty uneventful now, to be honest. But everything has changed. Like, COVID happened, the game has only gotten bigger and bigger. This FanFest has had so much more interest than I've ever seen in FanFests up until this point. And the reason they needed a new system is because, as I said, the NA site was crashing all the time, and it was first come, first served, which people didn't feel was fair. Like, not everybody's going to be available on the time, on the spot, to start hitting the refresh button every 5 minutes in order to get a ticket. Which is why they decided they were going to go with the lottery system. Now, when we first heard they were going with the lottery system, a lot of us were happy about it. We're just going like, okay, that's good. They listened to the feedback from North America. EU didn't need it, but we all know the game is bigger now. COVID changed everything as well. People are dying for new events. We did miss the last FanFest. It was cancelled because of COVID. And they gave us a lottery. But the lottery was handled in one of the worst ways I've ever seen. Because the lottery was literally us applying for it. And then after a few days, they did a random draw, and then a bunch of people got emails with codes. And you could use that code later to purchase your own ticket with no time limit. But once you purchased your ticket with that code, the code would become invalid. A weekend was triple booked and leaving only 50 cast spots available in a venue that can hold almost 200k. You'd have to ask them about it as well. Like, the XL is happening. It's having the same issues as well. I don't even think we're going to get 15k in the EU one. But yeah, the lottery was held pretty badly. Now, the main reason that it turned into a disaster is because for some oversight that they didn't see, we saw it coming. These codes weren't tied to their SE accounts, which is what we all assumed it would be. As soon as they said it was going to be a lottery, we were all under the assumption that, okay, it's going to be a lottery, we're going to have a chance to get a code, and that code's going to be tied to our account in some way, and then we use that to buy our tickets when the times come. That would have been fine. The issue, though, however, is the codes aren't tied to our account. So the codes essentially are just a code that you type in. Anybody can do it. You can give it to anybody, and they can go onto the website, type it in, and then buy the tickets. This is where it turned into an absolute fiasco. So take a look at this image, for example. Within minutes, people were on eBay selling these goddamn codes. Like, look at this. Like, here's one for the United States. Here's another one from Germany. And these are low ball prices, FYI. These are low. People were selling them for thousands at one point, and they even sold. I haven't found the images, but I remember seeing them. People sold these codes for hundreds, almost thousands of dollars or euro, and they sold. Now, granted, eBay doesn't like people doing this, so eBay has been good at actually closing these things down, but they're literally just enforcing their rules. Nobody made Square Enix give out codes like this that could be sold. This was literally the worst thing they could have done. They literally gave people the way to make free money. Now, essentially, what this meant was only a small percentage of people actually got codes. So it was already, FanFest was already generating a huge amount of hype, and then they brought out the system just going, okay, we're going to do the lottery, apply for the lotto, and you could apply for free, you didn't have to pay for it. So everybody applied, regardless of whether or not they were going to FanFest or not. So this is what's happening in NA. A load of people applied that didn't even plan to go in the first place. Then the lottery happened, people received their codes, and then quickly they realized these codes aren't tied to your account. You could just sell them if you wanted. So people started to sell them. And then it turned into an absolute fiasco. So most people who wanted tickets legitimately couldn't get them. And people had to start resorting to buying codes off people. But what's worse is the EU lottery happened afterwards. So everybody knew what the score was now. They knew what the codes were. So everybody started making EU accounts and started applying for them. Like, you didn't even have to, like, the other thing that they were supposed to do, and what they said they were going to do ages ago, is they said in order to be eligible for the lottery, you needed to be subscribed for a certain period of time. That didn't pan out. The only rule was you needed to be subscribed. That was it. You didn't need to subscribe for 6 months before this lottery was announced. You didn't need to subscribe 2 months or anything like that. It was just as long as you're subscribed. So people started making EU accounts and subscribing in order to get these tickets. Like, even people from NA. Then the EU lottery comes along, and a very tiny percentage only got codes. And this went over a 2-day period. We're not exactly sure why that happened. They sent out half the emails one day, then sent the other half the second day. I have a feeling that something broke, and then they just started sending codes that way. Not really sure why they did that. They haven't explained themselves. But the fact of the matter is, loads of people applied for the EU lottery solely to get a code, and a lot of them just wanted to troll or just to sell tickets because they knew it was happening. And people started selling codes right away as soon as the EU one launched, and it turned into an absolute fiasco, and people were buying them. Like, here's one, for example, that has a bid on it. These are not alone. People were bidding and buying these tickets. No exaggeration. They were spending hundreds of euro on these codes. And these codes may not even have been valid. They had no way to know. Not until the point that the site actually allowed you to enter the code would you know it's valid. So it was a big fiasco that way, like. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I have my finger on the pulse of who was attending FanFest, because I'm the admin of the Fan Events Discord. Like, so most of the people in my Discord are going to FanFest. So that's hundreds of people. And a tiny percentage of them got tickets. Like, it was heartbreaking. But also, there was a lot of anger directed at SE as well, because how could you do a system like this? You did a lottery, that was the good thing, but you just held it incorrectly. You didn't hold to your promises of you need to be subscribed for a certain amount of time, you just needed to be subbed in the end, and the codes weren't tied to your account. It was just a disaster. Like, they wanted to avoid scalping, instead they encouraged it. They encouraged people to apply for this lottery to get a code to sell the code on eBay. What the hell were they thinking? It just turned into a whole mess. But that's where we are right now. So EU already has its codes, and we're going to hit general sale next week. We don't even know how many of these tickets are going to be available next week, but I'm hoping a lot of people do get them. But yeah, it's fueling speculation as well that the FanFests are going to be actually a lot smaller than the ones that we used to have. Like, Derek pointed it out there just a minute ago, saying they triple booked the venue, leaving only a small amount of spots available. I think that's what's happening as well. These venues are very small. Well, they're not small. Like, the NA venue is the Las Vegas Convention Centre, a gigantic venue. The venue for London is the XL, which is one of the biggest convention venues in Europe. But it's not the entire venues. Like, there's a small portion of each venue that they're booking out. But looking at all the information we have, and I agree with the speculation of everybody else, that our FanFests this year are actually going to be smaller than most of the other FanFests we've seen. I am speculating, but I have a feeling that the EU FanFest is going to be somewhere between the scale of London 2014 and Frankfurt 2017. Like, Frankfurt 2017 for EU was much bigger than London, but I have a feeling that this one in the XL is actually going to be just as big, if not smaller, because so few tickets rather, were actually obtainable with these codes. And as I said, SE has been very quiet about this. Like, they sent out a tweet before NA went to general saying there's a few thousand tickets left. They've sent out nothing for the EU one to say that, yeah, there's going to be a few thousand tickets left for general sale. We don't know what's going to happen with the general sale, if anything's going to happen at all. I'd say there's probably going to be a few tickets. I think that's going to be granted. A lot of people would have only purchased one ticket. So there will be tickets, but we don't know how many. I'd say there's going to be very few. I feel they just booked whatever cheapest slots they could find in a specific time frame. You're probably right, but let's not forget, this isn't the only event that FF14 is, that Square Enix is actually hosting, because the concert is happening right after. So they're actually having to fund two events, and they're happening in completely different areas. Like, for example, in London, FanFest is happening in the XL, and then the concert is happening over the other side of London in a very small venue. That is probably going to fit a couple of thousand people at most, or even 1,000 people. So people are nervous about tickets for that, but we're going to find out. It's now so popular, I wouldn't even dream of going to FanFest at this point. You really should. Like, I say this to everybody. FanFest is worth it. It's so worth it to go to FanFest. If you have the opportunity, go. It's so worth it. Like, I can't even explain how much it's worth it. Like, to be with everybody else, like, You're in an entire convention center where everybody around you shares your passion and your interest. Everywhere you look is an FF14 player. That's the beauty of it. That's why I love FanFest. I love it for the people. That's why I have the FedEU as well, because it allows people who are going on their own to find people to go with, and it always works out. So, if you have the chance to go to FanFest, do it. You'll find like-minded souls there. You'll never be on your own. But yeah, that's enough about FanFest. Is there anything else I needed to go through? My nose is getting very dry as well. I think I'm coming down with something. Being at a con is like being in another universe. I suppose it depends on the con. If you go to Comic-Con, it does feel like you've fallen down the rabbit hole, essentially. And you're like, oh my god, this is brilliant. Some parts of it are cringe, but the rest of it is brilliant. Like, I love Comic-Con. But FanFest it's better, because it's all stuff catered to you. Like, a lot of stuff at Comic-Con, for example, wouldn't interest you. Like, I don't read comic books, so that part of Comic-Con doesn't interest me. I love anime. I love everything else. One that makes your credit card cry. That's true, but I've encouraged a lot of people to make budgets throughout a year or even years for FanFests. Like, I have my own budget. I just have a percentage of my paycheck every month goes into a fund. And then by the time a FanFest comes around, I look at my fund and it's just like, okay, I'm ready. Let's go. And everybody else does that. I encourage everybody else to do that. I suppose there's not really much else I need to go through, but there is one more subject I actually wanted to discuss with everybody. Now, the subject I'm going to be discussing is Eureka Orthos. So, if you haven't done Eureka Orthos yet, there's going to be spoilers in this, particularly for the final floor. But it's mainly just to go through a theory I've had. Where's the site for? It's probably on the lodestone somewhere, though. Where is it? Ah, there we go. It's on there. Okay. Yeah, if you don't want spoilers for Eureka Orthos, I invite you to bow out now, because I'm going to be doing some spoilers. But it's mainly just to address a topic that I have. So, I need to get out to the media. The site was just updated now with the media of Eureka Orthos as well. Specifically about the final boss on floor 99. He is an interesting boss, by the way. And the boss's name is Excalibur. So this is Excalibur. So this boss he's interesting. He's a fight and a half as well. Like, the guy has just destroyed me on so many times. It is a very good raid. But mainly, my discussion is mainly regarding this fellow here. So he is, as I've said, the boss of the 99th floor. Or technically, he's not the actual boss. The boss itself is the sword. So you may have noticed that he has an implement embedded in his chest. So essentially, he has a giant glowing sword embedded in his chest. So this is Excalibur. And if it looks familiar to you, it should, because the weapon looks like the Excalibur relic weapon that we got in A Realm Reborn. Our weapon was designed based on this weapon. Now, if you recall from doing the relic weapons in A Realm Reborn, the Zodiac weapons are sentient. So essentially what that means is they've developed over a point, essentially, where they become sentient beings themselves. So these weapons have a consciousness. They have a soul. And that means they can only be wielded by certain individuals, aka the Zodiac Braves of time gone by. Essentially, yeah, Rev. The sword is essentially that, because I don't think this guy's name is Excalibur. It's the sword itself. But it's going back to the fact that the sword has a consciousness. So I think the sword is embedded in this figure here. And it's actually speaking through him. Or he's actually speaking as well. But the sword is the main thing. Now, this figure is interesting to me as well. Because this figure talks about Flegton, who is... Oh, actually, I'll look him up as well. Just I think I spelled his name right, did I? Yes. So if you recognize this lovely fellow here, or I can probably get a full-size image. Oh god, give me a proper image, please. I mean, I love the fandom sites. At the same time, I hate the fandom sites. Yeah, Flegton. There you go. So, for those of you who don't know, Flegton was a central figure in the Allegan Rebellion towards the end of the Empire. He was a general who led the rebellion forces against Xande and his rule. He paid the ultimate price for it, unfortunately, when Flegton was captured by the Empire's forces and experimented upon. So he was poked, prodded, and made into a mindless drone for them to use. He was also cloned, because you see a lot of Archon clones in the World of Darkness, and you also see them in Eureka Orthos. So they were created, and likely he was modified in Eureka Orthos itself. So he was a leading figure in the rebellion, as I've said, but at the same time, this figure here seems to have some relationship to Flegton. He seems to be a friend or a comrade of some kind, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if this figure, whoever he actually was another central figure in the rebellion against Alak and against Xande, who was also likely captured at the same time. So he was probably a general in the Allegan Rebellion that was captured at the same time Flegteron was. The thing that stands out now at this point is the sword. So it's rather interesting that the fact that the sword is embedded in the guy's chest, unfortunately. This sword and shield that he's using are very nice. We don't have weapons like them in FF14. They are similar to the relic weapons, but not fully. This is fully similar to the one-handed Excalibur sword. Like, our Excalibur is almost identical, except there's some subtle details that are incorrect, which is understandable, because this sword existed long before our Excalibur, and our Excalibur was created thanks to books and described content and lore about this sword. That's how we created our relic. But this relic is sentient, as I've said. But the question remains, is it actually talking? Is the sword the one talking through him? It seems the elegant systems that are embedded here are actually controlling the sword, and they're controlling this figure as well. You hear this person talking, or we think it's him talking. He goes on about, "I'm sorry, release me, end this." We don't know whether it's him talking, or we don't know whether it's the sword talking, because it keeps saying, "Release me." Does it want to be pulled out, for example? That's what I was thinking when I was looking at him, just going, is it actually the sword talking to us? Because there's an automated elegant system controlling this guy, making him fight, but at the same time, this weapon seems to be the primary power source and the primary thinking about it. You think the name of the guy has been revealed, but that might be a spoiler. Please spoil it if you want to. Well, for me, I've already given people the warning. But my main point of thinking is this. Immediately after we defeat, we're just going to call him Excalibur for now. He dissipates like a hologram, and then the sword falls to the floor, and the sword gets teleported down to floor 100 to be sealed away at the deepest point of Eureka Orthos. And there it lays in a giant stasis field, stored away. And that's primarily the interesting part. It's mainly, I was just thinking about it the other day, just going, this is very interesting. But I'd like to know who this figure was. But it also led me down a different path as well. Like, the first theory I gave you was this figure was a partner to Phlegton, so he might have fought in the resistance. Artorias, king in Ilsabard, who was defeated by the Alligans, possibly. That's my other theory as well, so let me actually do this theory before I do. So, borrowing on your theory, Artorias, the king of Ilsabard, who was defeated by the Alligans, is it entirely possible that because of this sword, and it's been stated in lore and legend that only the Zodiac Braves wielded these weapons, is it entirely possible that this figure standing before us, which you'll call Artorias, was he the actual Zodiac Brave that the legends were told about? Because most of the Zodiac Brave legends come from Thavnir, but it's entirely possible that this guy is the original, the real deal, the genuine article, a Zodiac Brave who was captured by Allag and twisted into what he is now, and he had this sword embedded in his chest. It's entirely possible he wielded the sword himself. But why not just have him wield it? Why embed it in his chest? Which led me to another theory. The sword might have been talking, and Phlegton might have actually been the one to wield that sword. Like, he has this unusual sword here, which kind of matches his overall outfit. But it's not out of the realm of possibility that once, as the leader of the Allagan Rebellion, that he wielded Excalibur. Like many things good, like many good things in 14, we will probably never know, and if they do tell us, it'll be extremely disappointing. Probably. The sword that turned Artorias into an abomination, that was later then used by the Alligans. But yeah, it's mainly just I wanted to bring this to people's attention because it's an interesting theory. Like, we got so little story, or none at all really. The only story we got about this figure is him appearing and his dialogue during his fight, which is a 2-on-2 dialogue. It's the first dialogue is an automated Allagan computer system controlling this figure, similar to how the other bosses were all controlled. And then you had someone or something whispering after each time, just going, Phlegton, forgive me, release me. It's also possible that the Braves were long-lived and that some of them fought in the Allagan Rebellion and fled to what became Thavnir. That's entirely possible as well. So, it's entirely possible that the Braves spanned thousands of years, and we just have legends about these figures. But it's entirely possible one of them was an Allagan. Like this guy, for example. So Artorias might have actually been a Brave, and he had this sword. Does she talk about him? I never actually, because I haven't actually defeated him yet. He's wiped me on every turn. I'll need to go back to that actually, so I might need to make another video about him. So I'll need to get that piece of lore now. Okay, I'll definitely look at that after, but I still need to beat 499 because he's wiped me every time I tried. So that's something I need to look forward to, but it's mainly just to all the fights I've had with him so far that I had this theory. So I look forward to finding out. But I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to go through. So unless you guys have any questions for me, I think we're okay just to end the stream here. Let me see here. No, that's fine. But I do hope we get this fleshed out. But I'm also thinking about Ko's other statement as well. That she said there are other facilities like Eureka Ortos around the world that are just sealed away, buried underground. We have seen so many of them. We saw the facility that is lying below the burn, for example. And we've seen Eureka Ortos. Like, there's so many facilities. So who's to say we're not going to see another Eureka Ortos down the line? Another facility lying below Mare Acidia, for example, where they did more experiments. But yeah, that pretty much caps everything off. So I think I'll actually just leave it there. I've not done it. This content is not my cup of tea, but I am fine spoiling it to myself. Yeah, we can all spoil ourselves once in a while, but when it comes to spoiling everybody else, you really want to try to tone it down. Especially me. I tended to spoil things and I didn't want to spoil it. The boss itself is probably an AI based on someone with the sword used as an aether source to power him up, like the AI in the Summoner questline based on that one guy who the Alags had killed. And there's also other things to think about, like the clone Tiamat and the clone Twintania, for example. They're called clones, but they're essentially constructs as well. So you are probably right on the money as well. That's something I'll have to look into. But yeah, I'll leave it there. I'll let everybody get to their Friday. It is Friday evening after all. We all have stuff to do. So I haven't... Well, I've started scripting my next video, but it's not there yet. I still have pieces I need to fill in, but this is usually me doing my research. But I am looking to start getting that done soon, and then I'm going to move on to preparing for 6.4 because it's not that far away anymore. So I need to get catch-up videos ready for that as well, so they'll be releasing. But otherwise, I thank everybody for joining. Freefly, don't worry about it, my stream will be uploaded. And I'm going to chop it up as well, like I did with the last one, and I'm going to upload it. Hope you have a good weekend, Little Onion Potato. Thank you very much. I might do another stream at some point, but it just depends what's happening. But anyway, everybody, go on, enjoy your weekends, and have a good one.